An Albany insider dishes about life at the center of power. Then we'll talk about all those illegal pot shops. The Point starts right now. Revenge, catharsis. Melissa DeRosa, Andrew Cuomo's right-hand advisor, is here to talk about her captivating book, What's Left Unsaid. And I can tell you, she leaves nothing unsaid. I want to talk to you about two quotes from your book that jumped out at me. They took everything, and I've never felt so alone. And they spoke to me because I obviously covered the other side of what you were doing every day. And I always wondered how difficult it was to make all those decisions as the pandemic was raging and you had no PPEs, no vaccine, and you were trying to save people's lives.
Well, no PPE, no vaccine, Marcia, also no direction. I mean, the federal government, which I talk about in the book, I grew up as someone who always believed in science and medicine and government. And in the moment when we needed the federal government to function most, they were nowhere to be found. I mean, Donald Trump was trying to wish the disease away. We New Yorkers remember well those days when the only sounds on the street were ambulance sirens that pierced the city. And it was terrifying, and it was important, and it was life or death in a way that I never ever dreamed I would experience a job.
So your book is very personal, but people who haven't read it, maybe you could share for them the feelings that you were experiencing as you were having to deal with the situation. I mean, it was personal. It
was personal, and you know, so much of politics is one-dimensional, and people view us in the press, in the tabloids, whatever, as, you know, this is a Democrat, this is a Republican, good, bad, monster, evil, whatever. And what I tried to do in this book was really sort of lift the veil and show people that at the end of the day, the people running government are people. And
very human.
And very human. And behind the scenes, while we were dealing with the pandemic, my marriage was falling apart. And I was dealing with infertility issues and mental health struggles. And I talk about in the book something that I think about all the time, which is at one point I called Pat Kane, who was the head of the nurses union, and it was the first healthcare worker who had died from COVID. This was the end of March 2020. And I said, you know, I would like to know the name and the phone number of the next of kin. And Pat Kane, anyone who knows her, is tough as nails. She was a Staten Island emergency room nurse for years. And she said, if you're going to call one, you're going to have to call them all. And I said, well, I plan to. I will. I'll do my best. And she broke down and said, there's going to be too many. And at the, you know, in the early evening hours, I would end my day, not end my day because I was working till midnight, but I would take a break in the day to call the family members of the people who died. And then literally, Marcia, as I write in the book, close the door to my office and lay on the floor and cry. And it was like in those moments that you really let yourself feel the weight of what was going on around you in an otherwise, you know, ridiculously hectic and insane, you know, moment that we were living through in history.
Do you think that people didn't understand the emotional toll it was taking on you and the people around you?
I think that they still don't. And I think that a lot of people, you know, COVID wasn't that long ago, but New York was the epicenter of the crisis globally for a period of time. And I think that we all experienced a level of trauma, Marcia, that like we're still processing. And I think part of that means sort of pushing it out of our minds and Monday morning quarterbacking and telling ourselves it wasn't as bad and why did we close everything down and why did we make these decisions. But I think it's really important, as I try to do in the book, to bring it back to life for everyone so that we remember, because there will be another pandemic and we're gonna need to learn from this one. And I think we also need to, as humans, allow ourselves a little bit of grace for how we all tried to get through that very difficult period of time.
And was it as difficult for the other people around you, the governor, all the people that you talk about in the book, his top advisors? Was it equally difficult, or did you have a special burden because you were the secretary to the governor, which people have to understand is the second most powerful job? It's not a secretary.
Yeah, no steno pads. No, I think everybody, you know, we all felt the weight of what we were living through, and the governor would say, you know, like, every ventilator we get, every piece of PPE we track down, every decision we make could prevent a grave from being dug on Hart's Island. And it doesn't get more real than that. And I was in a unique position because my marriage was falling apart, because I live in New York City, but I was up in Albany, completely separate from everyone and feeling particularly isolated, that I didn't have family to go home to. And, you know, the governor's kids moved into the mansion, and other senior staff would go home to their wife and kids, or their husband and kids, or whomever. And so it was a really isolating experience. And, you know, I talk about in the book, it was so busy during the day, and then in those alone moments, it was so difficult.
So how do you think you changed because of this whole experience?
You know, I think I'm still processing it on a lot of levels, but government matters and humanity matters. And I write in the book about how, you know, when I think about government, I see the promise and the peril, because in a lot of ways, COVID, we were at our worst, right? The federal government was a disaster. Everything was being politicized. You had protests breaking out over mask burnings and, you know, a lot of anarchy. But at the same time, New Yorkers came together. We bent that curve. We were at one point projected to have the entire hospital system collapse. But the governor stepped up into that leadership role. He brought the state together. We provided people the facts. They did the right thing. And we led the world through a pandemic. And so I see the good in it, too. And I'm going to try to continue to and believe in government as a force of good.
But you also had to go through another traumatic thing, which was the, I guess you'd call it the Me Too experience of 11 women coming forward to accuse the mayor of improprieties. And what was that like for you?
It was, to say it was pure insanity is an understatement, Marcia. And, you know.
Was it unfair?
It was absolutely unfair. I mean, look, people, we live in a time, it's 2023, we live in a time where, thanks to the Me Too movement, I think, which was a very necessary corrective in this country in a lot of different ways, women can speak up and speak out and set their own boundaries. At the same time, we entered this phase of pure insanity, where it was the weaponization of everyday interactions for political gain and personal gain, where suddenly, you know, putting your hands on someone's face at a wedding is front page news for the New York Times. And, you know, I fear, as someone who spent my life in a male-dominated industry, who has broken glass ceilings, who has fought for women's rights, that we are sort of teetering on the edge of the Me Too movement setting women back, where all of a sudden serious claims are, people roll their eyes or dismiss because they think this has all just gotten silly. And so, you know, knowing Andrew Cuomo the way that I've known him for years, when this was happening, I'm like, he's a lot of things. He's not this. And so it was incredible to see the press corps, who I think covered him for 40 years, who I think in their heart of hearts knew that, sort of not just being along for the ride, but leading the charge to put the head on the wall.
See, I also wondered what it was like for you after he resigned to have to call Kathy Hochul, a woman who you had to tell was not going to be on the ticket, to suddenly tell her you're going to be governor.
And twice, I tried to do it twice, Marcia, as I write in the book. In 2018, I once told her she was off the ticket, and then again, you know, in 2021, early 2021. And I write in the book about this moment where we fly down to the city. The world has no idea that Andrew Cuomo is about to resign. Just his children and me, essentially, at that point, knew what he was about to do. That was really
powerful.
And I pick up the phone and I call Kathy, and I said to her, you know, the governor's going to resign effective 14 days. And she, in this sort of plucky manner, is like, we don't need 14 days. Lieutenant governors are ready to take over in a moment's notice. And as I write in the book, Marcia, I had this moment where I was no longer sad and distraught. I was like, boom, it like snapped me back to me. And I was like, you don't know what you don't know. And governing is hard. And the flip sort of reaction to her taking over the position was really troubling to me. And unfortunately, sort of as what I predicted would happen since has sort of played out.
So we have about 30 seconds left in this section. I wonder how you think she's doing. Is it better with a woman on top, or you think she still has some lessons to learn?
You know, look, I think that it's not about having a woman on top. I think it's about having the best person on top. And women should never be disregarded, or African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, anyone, because of their race or gender. But I think that, you know, there's been a lack of leadership, and that's been reflected in the migrant crisis, her poor showing in the polls last year. And I'm hoping that she steps up.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there for now, but our conversation continues right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York.